Welcome to Take 10 on Tuesdays with the Tennessee Tribune. I'm Sandra Long-Weaver. I'm the editorial director for the Tribune. And today, our guest is civil rights activist and founder of the Children's Defense Fund, Marian Wright Edelman. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And tell us, what brings you to Nashville?
What brings me to Nashville is our desire to put freedom schools all over Nashville.
Okay.
To close summer learning loss for our children, particularly those who are poor and non-white, and we need them. We took the Mississippi Freedom Summer, which we celebrated the 50th anniversary of last year, but where we had freedom schools to keep children out of harm's way in the middle of the voter registration campaign. But we took the concept of freedom schools that summer, and we put a very exciting integrated reading curriculum underneath it where children can get the best books picked by the leading children's experts that are developmentally appropriate.
Okay.
They look like them, see people that look like them. They give children hope, but they teach a love of learning.
Okay.
And kids eat them up. We're really, and they're taught by black college students, and most of them are black and Latina college students, mostly black, who come from the neighborhoods where they come to, because it's hard to be what you can't see.
Right.
But freedom schools are really an extraordinarily energetic, and we're closing that summer learning gap, and we're empowering children to make a difference in themselves and in their communities.
Now, when you say you're closing the summer gap from when school closes at the end of May, mostly here in Nashville, then reopens in the middle of August. It's a 6-week program, and it's designed for kindergarten through 8th grade.
No, through 12th grade.
Through 12th grade.
Through
Okay.
12th grade,
Oh.
and it keeps them off the street. It gives them role models, and the evidence shows that 2 to 3 months of summer learning loss occurs for non-poor children, because non-poor parents send their kids off to summer camps and all these enrichment kinds of programs, and our kids don't have that.
Is there a cost for Freedom School?
They are free for the children.
They're free for the children.
You can run freedom schools for about $60,000, and we partner with school systems, with community groups, with churches, with juvenile detention facilities.
Really?
They fit it with homeless shelters, and they fit everywhere because they are child-centric. The college students who teach them come to Haley Farm down in Knoxville for training, for a week of intensive training on how to deliver this integrated reading curriculum. We do something called Harambe, and it's just full of energy.
Oh,
and
really?
children love it.
Okay.
And they also have to engage in a service activity, and they engage in a citizenship, or what we call a social action activity. They learn about what children did in the civil rights movement. They learn that they're not citizens in waiting, but it's just fun. I don't know why we have to think that learning should be fun, not fun.
Okay.
So it's a terrific, and people should go to our website and look at it.
Okay. Now, and there are 2 schools where the Freedom Schools in Nashville.
Excuse me.
Are there more?
We had 2 schools last summer, and hopefully we're going to have at least 2 schools this summer, and hopefully more. I was at Buena Vista School this morning.
Ah, okay.
And it's a wonderful school, and I had the privilege of reading to the 3rd graders and the 1st graders, and it's wonderful.
Great.
And they have a disproportionate number of homeless children in that school, but you would never know it. And they're engaged, and parents are engaged. But we need to have this kind of effort everywhere, because too many of our children don't have positive alternatives to the streets, don't have positive role models, and and I loved it. There were some of our former Freedom School teachers that were there this morning. One is in medical school at Meharry, and one has now gone into public teaching. And one of the things that I'm very pleased about is that a number of, about 80% of our Freedom School teachers come from the communities where these children come from, or black and Latina, mostly black, but they, are terrific role models. It's hard to be what you can't see. But a number of them now are so turned on by the children that and by the Freedom School curriculum and the energy in Freedom Schools, that they're changing their majors and they're becoming public school teachers and principals.
Is that right?
Oh, it's
That's
wonderful. And we need a new pipeline because, as you know, the majority of our children in schools are not white.
Right.
But the majority of our teachers are. And there's often a cultural disconnect. And so Freedom Schools work, and we're also creating a pedagogy institute for Freedom Schools, that we're working with Freedom School with teachers in public schools so that they can become more culturally attuned. And so we've got to turn it around, because at the moment, about 80% of black children
Mm-hmm.
in 4th and 8th grade cannot read or compute at grade level in 4th or 8th grade, and that is a sentence of social economic death. And we're so concerned about the cradle to prison pipeline and our kids not being hopeful and being beat down by poverty that we've got to say to them, hey, you got a future out here, and here's how we're going to help you get to it.
That's wonderful. And last point on that, because I have some other things I want to ask you about. How do you get your child enrolled?
You call up the Children's Defense Fund here in Nashville, and Reverend Janet Wolf is our director here, and we have 2 or 3 other extraordinary black male teacher mentors that are working with Freedom Schools, and they are really gifted. One of whom was on in maximum security prison for many years for something he didn't do, including a number of years on death row, and he's a gifted artist. And tonight we're going to be showing some of the exhibitions of the art that Ndume is working with middle school kids to produce. And Damien teaches in a middle school and is also kind of there 24/7. For these young people, and he's a very gifted organizer, teacher, and preacher. He can sure preach. And Eric is another great organizer, preacher. And so we're really out in the public housing projects and in the poorest neighborhoods, and kids just need to see positive alternatives to the streets. And I think our project here is doing it. I'm very happy about it.
It sounds like it. And there's a lot of energy behind it. Now, tied to that, you have done, or Children's Defense Fund has done, a research project, Ending Child Poverty Now. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, after a transforming civil rights movement, where black parents and children sacrificed everything to get a better education, we're now back here with 80% of our children not able to read and compute at grade levels, with 1 in 3 of our black boys born in 2001 going to prison in their lifetime, and it's all lodged at that intersection of race and poverty. And we're moving backwards, and it breaks my heart when I look at the data and see the black child is the poorest child in America. 51.1% of black babies are born poor today.
Poor?
Poor. And more than 50%. We're the
Mm-hmm.
poorest child in America after all of this effort and all of this hope to build a better future.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to wake up the country, but we're also trying to wake up the black community to say, hey, wake up and claim your children, because they're crying out for help. And we contracted with the nonpartisan independent Urban Institute to look at 9 programs that we know work, that make work pay. Minimum wage, make their earned income tax credit refundable, the child tax credit refundable, child care subsidies, all these things that relate to children but also can raise income, and housing subsidies, which were important. But they looked at these 9 programs, and we said, how much could we, if we fully invested in these programs, how much could we reduce child poverty by? And what would it cost? And they came back and they told us that we could reduce overall child poverty for the 14.7 million children of all colors who are poor. And we are the poorest age, children are the poorest age group in this country, and it's going to be our undoing.
And children are considered 12 and under?
No,
or
just children.
Children.
Okay. But and the younger they are, the poorer they are. The preschool children, their years of greatest brain development, and so early childhood development is a big, big priority for us. And getting everybody ready for school, and then getting every school ready for every child, and stopping these bad school discipline policies that are pushing kids into juvenile detention. But the bottom line is the Urban Institute told us we could, if we invested in these 9 programs in this nation, reduce child poverty for all children of the 14.7 million by 60%, for black children by 72%, and lift the floor of all those children living in extreme poverty, and there are about 6.5 million children living in extreme poverty. That means they're hungry, they're often homeless, by 97%. And it would cost $77 billion a year. And so we say that's about 2% of the federal budget. That's a bargain, because every year, and we've had leading economists, including Bob Solow, who just won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and is an MIT Nobel laureate in economy, tell us how much we're wasting in America by having all these poor children. And he said for us a number of years ago in a book that we call Wasting America's Future, and was repeated, that it cost us about $500 billion, $500 billion a year in school dropouts, in dependency and in incarceration costs to keep children poor. And so we're now saying, hey, the country cannot afford to keep all these children poor. You invest $77 billion, you're going to save a lot in prison costs, you're going to save a lot in dropout costs, you're going to save a lot in incarceration costs, and many of our states are spending on average 2 times more and sometimes 3 times more per prisoner than for public school pupil. That's about the dumbest investment policy. But we're now got to get the black community saying we're going to sort of stop this backward slide, because this is a scary time for the black community. We are moving backwards. But if your children aren't educated, they don't have a chance in this globalizing and competitive economy. So wake up, black folks. Act, put black children higher on your agenda.
Right.
And nobody's going to love them more than we love them, and we're not loving them enough. They desperately need us to speak up for them, and they were the centerpiece of the civil rights movement.
They were.
And they got to become the centerpiece
some were
again.
arrested.
And many were arrested, and all of our Freedom School children read about Little Ruby Bridges. They read about Diane Nash and the sit-in kids,
right.
And what went on in here in Nashville, and that's why we want them to feel empowered to make a difference in their lives. And so it's a very exciting model, but we've got to deal with poverty, and we've got to wake up to the fact that racism is back again. Mm-hmm. It's got more polite forms, some of it, but some of it's not so polite.
Sure.
And we are teetering, in my view, on the edge of a second post-Reconstruction era, and we better wake up. But children have to be the key, and ending child poverty is key.
Mm-hmm.
And President Obama has now talked about investing billions in an early childhood system, which is long overdue, which most other
Do you think he'll be able to convince Congress to spend this money?
It depends on how much noise we make out here in the community. I mean, Congress doesn't do anything unless they're pushed to do something. Mm-hmm. Who thought that the Civil Rights Acts could be passed in the early days? It took a ruckus, and we need to start raising a ruckus so that our children don't go hungry. And they don't go without adequate safety and without adequate child care. And so I just hope that the black community is going to step up to the plate and save our children, because if we don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
Okay. And now tell me this is more of a personal question. You are so energetic. How do you keep going and keep this fight going to keep our children, to educate our children, to really push for them?
Well, I believe very deeply in what I did, and I grew up in an era when we had wonderful role models. Mm-hmm. And my Wear Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman around my neck. Yes. And while many black folk have done a lot better, they ought to remember that Harriet Tubman got herself freed, didn't wait on Mr. Lincoln to do it, but she went back to bring other people to freedom. And if we don't lift back and bring our children to freedom, we're not going to be free. And the country is not going to be free come 10 years or 20 years from now, as the majority of our children are going to be non-white. So we better invest in them. But secondly, great role models. I always felt so lucky to have been born who I was when I was, at the intersection of great historical events and great people, great parents in my community, great co-parents in my community. And while the segregated South Carolina town I grew up in didn't, it's told us as black children we weren't worth anything, we didn't believe it, because our black parents said it wasn't so, the preacher said it wasn't so, and we knew it wasn't so, but we also knew we had to get an education in order to give it back. Mm-hmm. And I guess the third thing is that I don't want my grandchildren and my children to have to fight the same battles that we fought. Shame on us.
Over 50 years ago.
Over 50 years ago, and all that sacrifice from so many people here in Nashville and all in Mississippi, where I spend an awful lot of time practicing law. How can we let it go back? Right. And so we owe our grandchildren a better life, and the country is. We've never really come to grips with our birth defects as a nation. And they flare up every 50 years because we've never had, like South Africa or other places, a real truth and reconciliation process. This country was built, right dream, on slavery, on Native American genocide, on exclusion of all women from the political process, all non-profited men. Right. And we had to fight a civil war, and then we had a post-Reconstruction era, and then we had a post-Reconstruction era, and then we had to have a civil rights movement, and we're back at it. And even though we've got a president whom we're very proud of in the White House, and we've got demographics that are changing and is running some people crazy, you have got a range of voter suppression things now, of poverty, with the black child being the poorest on the totem pole. It runs me crazy. After the civil rights movement, to have this be there. And while we've got a few at the top who are doing well, you got to save your children if there's going to be a strong black future. And so I can't think of anything that can motivate me more.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Edelman. I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Our guest today has been Marian Wright Edelman, who has been a civil rights activist for more than 50 years, and founder and CEO of the Children's Defense Fund. And there is a report. Can you also get this online?
You
Ending
can get
Child
it online.
Poverty Now.
Absolutely.
And the website is
www.childrensdefense.org.
.org.
.org.
All right.
And look at Freedom Schools while you're on the website as well and see how you can get them in this community and all over Tennessee.
All right. Thank you so much.